All right, the lady says it's recording. Here we are on The Blind Man in Black. I'm Brian Snyder. Thank you for watching on YouTube and listening on Apple Podcast. If you like the show, please rate, subscribe, and review. And if you don't like it, send it to your opposing political party to rate, subscribe, and review. And if you like my wife and I being exhausting, please go to the Exhausting Snyders on TikTok. I'm super excited because I have a former classmate from UCLA. We went to UCLA's School of Theater, Film, and Television and Directing. He is a director and an educator, Jonathan Gellert. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Brian. This is great.
Did I pronounce your last name? I meant to ask you that correct. Is that
Gellert?
Yes.
Yes, you did.
Excellent.
My whole life it was Geller or Geller.
Uh-huh.
You said it right, Brian.
Wonderful. Wonderful. I did one thing right. All right. I'm so glad you're here, man. So far. Yeah, I'll fuck it up eventually. But in any case, so how have you been holding together through this pandemic?
I'm very, at this moment, anxious because I'm supposed to go to Florida on Saturday, and I live in New York City. I actually live in Union Square. I live on 13th Street. The rates are spiking tremendously, and I'm enormously apprehensive about whether I'll be able to go down to Florida and see my parents on Saturday and bring my children. And that's something we really look forward to doing. And it's very much in the air. My youngest son, I have 3 sons. I have a 16-year-old son, a 13-year-old son, and a 9-year-old son. My 9-year-old son was sent home today with the possible fear of having been exposed to COVID.
Oh, and, no.
We have a test that's incredibly delayed. That's something, I don't know if it's true in LA, but it's certainly true in New York, that the delays on the tests are just really a problem. So how am I doing? I'm tremendously anxious, Brian. Anxious is the adjective I'd use right now.
Yeah.
Hoping that I can get down to see my parents in Florida, but obviously understanding if I can't, because the possibility of that seems pretty large and getting larger. It's a pretty anxious time right now. So anxious.
Yeah, I can hear it. It's yeah. I mean, I'm so sorry. That sounds so stressful. The timing, of this is horrible.
The timing of this is what it is. I mean, when you had asked me to do this a few months ago, the relationship to COVID was different.
Yeah.
I did not think at that point that I would be saying that to you, but that is where we are for sure, and it's yeah, it is what it is, man. It definitely is what it is for sure. Very anxious.
So when you in the initial, like last year, I was talking with Aaron Feinstein, who went to UCLA with us, and he was saying, or Feinstein, excuse me, but he was saying that everything kind of shut down, and he enjoyed certain aspects of it, but the other things, I'm sure it was very scary as well, because the rates were high at one point. So I mean, how did you deal with it? How was it for you?
Well, I've been teaching in a very urban school for the last 3 years, and I hope we get into that, but that's been new for me. The last 3 years I've been teaching in a school called Lehman High School in the Northeast Bronx, and I've been a teacher in the DOE, and I was fully remote last year, except for the first 3 months where teachers were allowed to go into the building. However, the kids were completely remote. How was that? I'm going to use a word that maybe you wouldn't expect, and I would say it was fascinating,
Mm,
fascinating, and I've learned and continue to learn so much about it, mostly about the word compliance. If we could jump right into it in terms of my relationship to to students, uh, I I learned a lot and continue to learn a lot about the idea of compliance, about students being compliant, which
mm,
is, I think, the fundamental basis of the uh, the relationship of education. That students come and they're expected to behave in a certain way, and that was thrown up in the air through COVID. It was a lot of things were just exploded in terms of everybody's relationship to what students were expected to do, what we were expected to do as teachers. And I learned so much during COVID, being remote. I'm sure your next question is going to be, what did I learn? I'm still figuring that out. I'm figuring it out all the time.
well, I was thinking it must have been difficult because you teach theater, correct?
I do. Theater and
And
English, theater and English. I teach
now
English also, but mostly theater. Yes.
the interactive aspects of that, I mean, must have been very difficult to do through Zoom, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Very much so. And my relationship with my students and also the DOE and the way that they approach that was fascinating.
Mhm.
We are right now, part of a frame right now. So there was something that I became aware of very early, was the frame. How can we deal with the frame? How can we deal with, maybe the left angle, the upper right angle? How can we deal with this frame? How can we deal with whatever space we have related to making it in some way a performative space? What does it mean for someone to come into the frame from off stage, so to speak, from
Mm.
off frame, and what can we do with that entrance? What can we do with the there are definitely things to explore. Now, I explored it to an extent, but I have to say, and I'm going to shout out a very good friend of mine named Josh Gelb, who did something called Theater in Quarantine, which if no one has seen it, you need to go and check out. You just put Theater in Quarantine in YouTube. This guy and Jesse Green of the New York Times named what he did as some of the best theater that happened during the pandemic. He made a closet. It's so funny I'm talking about Josh, but that was the most incredible in my of any that I've seen uh, capturing of this possibility, which I'll talk about related to students, but I believe that Josh did it far exceeding what I did
Mm.
in some ways, in many ways. Again, just check out Theater in Quarantine and see what Josh did. He took his closet and he created a theater space from his closet and did these absolutely profoundly magical things with his empty space. And I don't want to even say anymore. Just check it out. Anyone watching this, you, Brian, please check out what Josh did. He certainly got a lot of press from it, as he deserves. I'm in contact with Josh. We're trying to, we're trying to, maybe do something. I would love to work with Josh. It's brilliant. I hate to, the word genius is thrown around. I think what he did was genius. I really do. And I really believe what he did was captivate on it. I'm sure there were other people that did. I did some of that, but mostly what I did was really talk about playwriting. I really shifted to playwriting.
Mhm.
I found that, one of the things about the DOE was that they did not require students to put on their cameras because, and that was very different than a lot of suburban schools where they said, yes, you have to be on camera. But
Mhm.
the DOE very quickly said, no, you don't have to. I think because, there are a lot of students in the DOE who if they put on their camera, it would be potentially embarrassing. Students live in shelters. Students have environments where there are things that they really don't want to share. So to say you have to put on your camera was an intrusion, which for theater, I mean, how do you teach theater when you don't have a face? And the majority of my students would not put on their camera. I found that I made it very much part of our lessons to put on your camera at certain points, and I could not force students to comply to that. So I didn't. But that, although it sounds like how can you teach theater without that, was a reality that a frame, so to speak, that I worked with. And
because I was thinking like it's a lesson in listening, right?
Always, very much. We did a lot of audio theater, a lot of sound, a lot of what sound can mean, but also a lot of playwriting, and I've learned in ways how to teach playwriting, or I don't even know if playwriting is the right word. Maybe devising, maybe more of what Susan Laurie Parks does, although I'm not trying to compare myself to her, but trying to create honest ethno theater, which I think is the term related to being honest and honoring students' honesty in terms of their experience. That's really what I did, and I've found that it's serving me now that we're back in person in ways especially related to the population that I'm teaching, which are definitely students of color, although not entirely. I have students who are white also, and students who are Latino, but the relationship to getting those students to express their feelings about all of the things that happened during this time in our country's history. I found that was the way that I've been approaching teaching theater, and it's continued to serve me. It serves me now, and it's continued to serve me.
Well, we're going to go back to theater, but I want to start at the beginning, the genesis of Jonathan. So where did it all begin?
For me, in terms of theater?
No, I mean, your life. Like, where are you from?
I'm from Queens. I'm from Bayside, Queens. I'm from a Jewish middle class family in Bayside, Queens. And
now, was theater a part of that?
No.
Except,
well,
what did your parents do?
My mother was a teacher, and a teacher of autistic children, and my father was a sales manager who then became the president of a small computer company, and then became a financial advisor. My father was a businessman, but they were enormously supportive of me. When I was 7, I heard the soundtrack of Annie for the first time, and it kind of changed my life. I don't know why, but I got very excited about all things theater. So my birthday presents from the time I was 7 were seeing Broadway shows. I just loved it, and it wasn't really part of my past. I just was attracted to it, and I was just a theater kid by nature, and I didn't really know it. Really, I was really into baseball when I was 7, 8, and 9. I was a huge baseball fan. I thought I was going to be a baseball player. I was terrible at baseball, but I thought I was going to be a baseball player. And then when I moved, we moved to New Jersey, and I got involved in in an outside theater group, and met some people that I ended up going to French Woods with, which is the theater camp where I know Brian Kite from, and especially a guy named Jeff Maynard. We ended up doing theater together, and I realized that's what I do. I do it. I do it well, and I got a lot of uh, affirmation for it, and got leads, and it ended up being something I did, and just from there it was very clear that that's what I did. I do theater, and I love it, and from there I never stopped. But when I was really young, when I was living in Queens, I loved listening to Broadway soundtracks, and just would listen to them all the time. I would listen to everything. I just loved it, and would sing along with it, and imagine directing it, imagine being in it. Just never had a problem just allowing myself to be imaginatively involved in everything Broadway. Started reading the New York Times Sunday edition every single Sunday, and just that was, it was very clear to me pretty early. I mean, really like 7, 8, 9, that was who I was, and never looked back. Yeah, go ahead.
What do you think attracted you to theater? Well,
I have no idea, man. No idea. Just no idea. Like, even now, like as I'm talking about it with you, I don't know. I really don't.
Interesting. I mean, I know exactly the reason. I think about my own, path in the theater, and it was really, I mean, to be brief, it was really a connection to be closer to my father, who was a comedian. And he loved movies and acting, and that was my way of saying, hey, pay attention to me. I mean, so that was so there was no like did you start out in acting, or where did you actually start?
Well, both. I mean, really musical theater, and I realized I could sing well, and that I enjoyed expressing myself through song and through acting. That it was something that it was not hard for me to do, easy for me to do. I was good at it, and I just enjoyed it. I loved it. I still love it. And just doing it, just whatever theater was. And honestly, going back to Annie, which is so crazy because I still love Annie, which is so weird, because I think Annie is a totally underrated piece of theater. I think it's so good.
It's my wife's favorite musical.
It's so good. It's so good. I mean, like those trombones and trumpet solo at the beginning, it's so sad, and it sounds like an orphan, and it just
maybe
and just like that overture, and it just something about it was like, this is real, and it's encapsulating something that just hit me, and it hit me hard. I had a cousin who was in Queens at that point, who I played baseball with, who was so much better than me. And as much as I wanted to be a baseball player, because really, I'm telling you, a lot of New York City kids at that point really wanted to be baseball players. 1977 was really the year. It was a big year, and it was Reggie Jackson, and it was I was flipping baseball cards, and I was really into baseball, and I until I was 13, I stupidly wanted to be a baseball player without any talent for baseball, but I wanted to do that. But I realized, as I was exploring whatever I had whenever I had a chance to explore this, I was like, this is what I'm good at. And I was definitely good at it, and enjoyed it, and just kept enjoying it, and kept getting affirmation from it. And then from there, pretty quickly, I started to get into really atypical things. Like, I got very into Eugene O'Neill when I was 12, for whatever reason. I just really did. There was a production of The Iceman Cometh with Jason Robards, and when I was a kid, and I just needed to see that. And honestly, seeing that play, and I told my parents I needed to see that play, and I did.
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, "All right, let's go." And I was really young, and you know, no, I didn't tell any of my friends about it because they would never have understood. But
Mm-hmm.
for some reason, that play knocked my head off, and I started reading all of O'Neill, and
Mm-hmm.
then I started reading a lot of other things from O'Neill. I started reading Arthur Miller, and
Mm-hmm.
I started really saying, "Wow, this is amazing how these people capture this." Not just musical theater, which was unbelievably important to me, but also non-musical theater. And Sondheim was obviously very important, but not
Mm-hmm.
really until I was about 16. I didn't really discover Sondheim until I was about 16. But then once I discovered Sondheim, that was a whole nother thing. Uh, and I was very lucky to go to French Woods, which is a theater camp, which I'm sure you've heard of,
Mm-hmm.
through Brian, which I continue to go to, which connected me to a world of people like me, this weird tribe.
Mm-hmm.
And you asked, why did I just? I have no idea. To this day, I have no idea why I'm attracted to it. I don't know. Today I taught all day, and I was talking about Tick Tick Boom with my students today. I have no idea why it excites me so much.
Mm-hmm.
Just does.
Now, what was your first production that you did?
I played Oliver in a production of Oliver at Knight's Day Camp in Saddle
Really?
River, New Jersey. Yes, I played Oliver, and that was it. Yeah, that was it. I played Oliver, and that was it. And listened to every version of the soundtracks. Didn't tell anyone about it, but I needed to know, how is the movie soundtrack different than the Broadway soundtrack? Why was
Mm-hmm.
the Broadway soundtrack different than the London soundtrack? These things were really fascinating to 9-year-old me. They really were. And I just needed to live inside that world. Loved it. And I'll jump to that. My 13-year-old son ended up playing Oliver at French Woods 2 summers ago, which, as you can imagine, was an enormously beautiful circle for me to
Yeah,
watch him play that role. But yeah, Oliver was my first big role,
I
playing
played
Oliver.
Fagin in high school.
I bet you were great. Great. I bet you
Thank
were.
you.
I bet you were a great Fagin. I can
I
see you being a great Fagin.
thank you. I probably copied Ron Moody. I think that was basically it. But I think I did all right for my age at that time,
I'm
but
sure you were. It was a great person to copy. And if there was anyone that, I mean, I really don't think of Fagin as being anything else than Ron Moody. Ron Moody
yeah.
is Fagin to me. But yeah, and then I played Joe Hardy in Damn Yankees after that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I played Barnum and Barnum.
Mm-hmm.
It was an illegal production that we did in New Jersey, and they called it the greatest show on earth
Mm-hmm.
because we couldn't really do Barnum. But I wrote to Jim Dale and wrote to him and said, please meet me backstage. And he did. And that was really important to me. And I remember what he said to me. He said, well, take tact. He said, that's very important. You should take tact. And I should have listened to him because, well, actually, I don't think it would have mattered. I don't think it would have mattered. I terrible dancer, which I think is really why I never really had a career working on Broadway. I cannot dance. Tried very hard. Can
Mm-hmm.
act, can sing. Really could not pass a dance call for sure. So,
Well, that's all right. So what was it like in the early days, like managing the balance between school and doing theater productions?
uh, it was like 2 different worlds. I school was hell for me.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in a really jockey, very Catholic. Nothing wrong with being Catholic, but very like not Jewish town. I was one of maybe 2 or 3 Jewish kids in my class in New Jersey,
Mm-hmm.
and no one was into theater. Very, very large human beings who did theater,
Mm-hmm.
who didn't do theater, and I did. And then on the weekends, I would go and do theater and find acceptance and find my people.
Mhm.
So the balance was I lived for my weekends and I lived for my summers.
Yeah.
I lived for the opportunities that I had to explore and be who I was. That's what it was for me.
Now,
Yeah.
was there ever a point? I know you said your parents were supportive, but was there a point in which you said, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do theater, and they were like, well, were
Yeah,
they always?
they really were supportive of me.
Mhm.
I I I I think that they really believed in my ability and they saw how passionate I was.
Mhm.
Uh, so no, they were glad that I was excited about
Mhm.
it. And so they didn't. And I was really, really focused in terms of theater. I wasn't necessarily focused in that way, in other ways academically. If there was conflict, it was related to that.
Mhm.
But uh, I,
Everything was getting in the way of theater, is what you're saying.
yeah,
Everything
yeah,
else. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. Everything was getting in the way of nothing felt real except for theater. And part of it was that I I hated for a little while until high school. It was really middle school. By high school, I it balanced out, and I learned how to be a student. I learned how to, kind of center it and be able to be focused towards, well, especially English and history, if not math and science. So I was able to be a better student and say, oh, okay, well, these things are related to theater. So I was able to be a better student, but
Mhm.
it not through middle school. So yeah, if there was any conflict, it just I just didn't care. I didn't care about anything except for theater until high school, until about
Mhm.
10th grade, at which point I uh, realized my life would be a lot easier if I got better grades and,
Mhm.
took the energy that I gave to theater and I devoted it to school, including some things I didn't like, which was math and science. I got better at those things just by realizing, oh wow, if I focus on those things and pretend to care about those things a little bit, my life gets easier.
Mhm.
So I did. So that's what I did. But through middle school, yeah, I was just really, I just hated everything except for theater. But I loved theater. I loved
Yeah.
my weekends. And so I was excited. So my parents weren't necessarily worried about it. So to answer your question, yeah, there wasn't really a lot of conflict because they were like, well, he's really into doing this.
Mhm.
So they went with it. They were progressive in that way, or maybe being practical. I don't know. I really don't. But
Do you have brothers or sisters?
I do. I have a younger brother.
Mhm.
I have one brother who was a tremendously good student
Mhm.
and also a very good athlete. He was on the traveling soccer team, and that was important where I grew up.
Mhm.
Being and I played sports all through when I grew up. I played soccer, I played baseball. I did, and I tried. I tried
Mhm.
hard. And but yeah, my brother Jason was definitely succeeding in ways that were very much the ways that you would succeed in the town that I grew up in, which were much more accepted. But I was lucky. I don't want to paint an unrealistic picture. I had teachers that realized what I did, even if I wasn't doing it necessarily in school. They saw that, oh, this kid's really interested in this, and I had a few really along the way that were really encouraging to me. Came to see my shows. I had a few teachers that would come to see my outside of school shows and celebrate them and tell kids. And I always had I always was able to, once I was really achieving in that way, bring that back to school and it got me, I suppose a little bit of status and credibility based upon, and certainly self-confidence.
Mhm.
So theater, but that was not what was valued in the town that I grew up in,
Mhm.
which I'm sure is pretty common or was pretty common amongst a lot of people growing up in suburbs at that point. It was definitely, sports. It
Yeah.
was definitely sports, which I didn't hate. I liked sports. I did.
Mm.
Yeah. So,
So who are some of your mentors, and how did they inspire you?
well, when I was a kid or now, I mean, I've had so many incredible mentors.
Well, let's just go through from the beginning to just a few that really were critical to your development.
My first really important mentor was a guy named Ron McFarland at this place called Showtime,
Mhm.
which and he was a mentor to a lot of these New Jersey kids that came up who ended up going to French Woods.
Mhm.
Uh, there's um, there's a guy named Dave Rosmer who who creates with a friend of mine named Steve Rosen, who I still play poker with
Mhm.
every other week. It's something we've done, continued to do during COVID every other week. And
Mhm.
Dave was also part of the Ron McFarland club.
Mhm.
Ron had this group called Showtime, and he created an elite group called Professional Children's Program, which he subtitled PCP, which was which was something that I never, we I was like, yeah, I'm in PCP, I'm in PCP. PCP is a great thing, and yeah. So I was part of PCP, Professional Children's Program, which
Okay.
was this elite group, part of Showtime, where
And
we auditioned.
PCP, the drug, wasn't a part of it.
Yeah, it was when I mentioned it, when I was asked about it in chorus class in 8th grade, not knowing what PCP was. Miss Birdsell, who I can't really say was a mentor, but she was so sweet, and she
Right.
knew it, and she was trying to really, because I was in chorus and I was singing really well. She was like, "Yeah, John, tell us about this thing you do on the weekend." I was like, "Yeah, it's called PCP." I had no idea why people were laughing about it. And of course, found out maybe 20 minutes later. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
okay. Well, now I know. But anyway, so that's what that was. Yeah,
And you're like,
PCP.
theater is a drug.
Theater's a drug. Theater's like PCP. Totally, theater's a drug. Uh, but other mentors going through. I mean, many. Uh, I've been lucky. I was lucky the whole way through. I had a lot of people who really were encouraging the
Mm.
whole way through. But yeah, he was the first. Ron McFarland was the first, and then my high school drama teacher was great.
Mhm.
A guy named Peter Coletto was great. He really was. I got the lead my freshman year, which was tough, both the lead in the musical and the lead in the drama. I played Grandpa in Can't Take It With You, and I played Val in Babes in Arms as a freshman, which was great. I mean, it was really cool to do that. I mean, it gave me
Mm.
a lot of status in high school, and you know, whatever, that was really important to me. Uh, but honestly, it was French Woods. This guy named Alan Lehrman, who was the head of theater at French Woods, who was a mentor to so many people at
Mm.
French Woods, and I would imagine Brian would say that too. He was just, and what he did, and I still, more than the other people I've mentioned, he's someone I totally try to model.
Mhm.
And what he did was create a sense of community and
Mhm.
a sense of yeah, community is the best word for it. Really create this wonderful sense of community where
Yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead. Please continue.
no. I mean, like, that's what I try to do as a teacher now, and certainly as a director. It's what I've always tried to do. To God, it sounds so trite. Create a space where people can really be who they are. It
Yeah.
sounds trite saying it, but I think it's true. I do.
Yeah.
Alan really did that. Alan Alan really did that. Yeah. So
Yeah, I mean, I think about, the directors that I've worked with, like Craig Belknap, at Cal Arts. He was my one of my acting teachers, and one of the things I loved about him is he was just so. It was that he created like a family, within whatever production we were doing, and he was just so excited by everything that we were doing, and he just loved, and he made me love the rehearsal process, the
no,
the the act of discovery, that and that was what made it so beautiful. And it sounds similar in that sense.
Yeah, Alan did that. And if we could jump to people in college, the person that did that for me is someone I'm still very closely in touch with, a woman named Geraldine Clark, who during COVID, I was part of a writing group with that I'm still part of. And Geraldine Clark was just an enormous mentor for me. Hard to explain. Sounds similar to what you're describing. She was and is someone who created an incredibly challenging, very rigorous, very rigorous, but very loving space, which was this incredible balance of testing people always, pushing people to. This was at Syracuse, where I did a BFA in acting and directing. She was inspiring every day. One of the things she did was made me hungry to know more about everything related to theater. And I think that's what led me to be a director, because I was training as an actor very seriously, which I loved and still do and still really miss, but found myself more often than not really enjoying the play, the dramaturgical underpinnings of the play. And sometimes when I was acting, thinking about it, which is not a good thing to do as an actor, not a good thing. While you're acting, you should not be thinking about what makes the play great. You should be thinking about your action, of course, and playing within the play, which I did, but I was always inspired because I think Jerry and other people modeled that. What makes a play incredible? What makes a play exciting? What makes a play shed light on the world, and not only my potential personal connection with whatever emotions that I'm feeling, but how that can transcend and become very illuminating for mankind, for humanity. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, what, like, when you're thinking about directing something, what can be the catalyst? Like, what is it something that's going on in society, or is it something that is personal that you relate to? What makes you choose a particular piece?
Well, what you just said, something that I feel is important. Although that has not been my life. My life since we've known each other has been teaching secondary students, and so it becomes, what do I think is important for them to explore, and also what's the best way to make sure that their experience is the best theatrical experience it can be, which has been really the guiding force for all of the things that I've chosen. But I'll make that a caveat. I've definitely chosen more interesting, I'd say challenging and questioning pieces. I've been very drawn to Beckett with kids, which is, I guess, different than a lot of people. I've directed Beckett with young people 3 times. Beckett short plays especially, and I find that I found that young actors have responded to the short plays of Beckett in really fascinating, inspiring ways. And beyond that, lots of things. Like, I don't know if you saw my production of Machinal. I think you had graduated by that point, but
I think so. Yeah.
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 So Machinal was my thesis at UCLA. I directed Machinal again with high school students, and I coach a lot of kids now, and I find that I'm drawn back to Machinal. And to answer your question, a piece like Machinal, which really resonates with every student that I've worked with on it, is an example of this a piece of theater that definitely penetrates through through their feelings about who they are, and gets to the root of something very important about themselves, American society. I mean, Machinal specifically about the system, the system, especially that forces women, at least that's what Sophie Trevor was doing, forces women into having to make certain very limited choices. But yeah, I've definitely every piece that I've looked for, I've tried very much to help students to understand what the piece can illuminate about their relationship to their reality. Not because I'm trying to impose it. It sounds so pretentious, Beckett with kids, Machinal with kids. Only if it's coming from them. And luckily, the experiences I've had have been that. They haven't been about my imposition of that. They've been about exploration, which is much more important than my feeling about it. Right. What are they caring? What are they feeling about it? Which maybe gets back to what Alan was doing in terms of creating a sense of community.
Now, when you left Syracuse University, where did you go from there?
I went to Boston. I got an MA in theater ed from Emerson, which I've had, I got 3 degrees. So I got a BFA from Syracuse. I have an MA from Emerson in theater education, and the MFA that we share. And in some ways, that MA in theater ed has been the most important degree that I got. Although I'm less in touch with the people from that program than any other. Although, going back to mentors, the person who was in charge of that program was a man named Robert Colby, who sadly passed away last year from cancer, who was a giant in the field of theater education. And he was an enormous mentor to me. And, I had this opportunity when I left Syracuse to move to New York, and the people I graduated with were starting as actors. And I really didn't want to do that. And I made a very clear choice to not want to do that, which was very surprising, I think, to me and also to a lot of people. And some of that was from the fact that I had been directing at French Woods at that point for about 4 summers, maybe 5. And the experiences that I had had directing were really important to me. And I really thought, I really want to explore this more. And I don't want to go to New York right now, because honestly, I saw a lot of those people doing a lot of drugs, doing a lot of behaviors that I was like, I don't want to go to New York right now and hang out and do that right now. That's not what I want to do. So I went to Boston, and I got an MA in theater ed, and really developed myself as a theater educator, and learned an enormous amount about teaching, and got a certification, got an MA in theater ed, and got a certification, and really studied the works of Vaclav Havel. Havel was my thesis at Emerson was Largo Desolado, which is one of the plays from Havel, which actually was inspired by Jerry Clark, who had done Temptation, which is one of Havel's plays. Amazing play. And the fact that Havel was this person who was able to create a way for theater to actually change something politically. He suffered for it. Havel and Boal were 2 people that were a massive part of my MA in theater ed. It's still very important to me. I still and tremendously inspired by Havel and read his essays. And I really think a lot of people should. The Power of the Powerless. I mean, Havel is kind of forgotten, but he has so much to say about truth and about truth in terms of politics. I really hope people read his works because it's amazing. But what he did was he used theater. He used theater to get inside of a lot of things politically, and that was really inspiring to me. So I directed Havel's play Largo Desolato. Luckily, when I was there, he was actually the commencement speaker at Harvard, and the year that I directed Largo Desolato, and I'll never forget that speech, and everything he said in that speech was just so profound. And there are so many things in that speech that are so true to today about the he started the speech talking about how he had just come back from Singapore, where people were exactly the same, where this is 1996 and people were exactly the same, and they were identical to the youth of America, to the youth of Czechoslovakia. It was Czechoslovakia, then not the Czech Republic, and yet there was so much underneath that was so different, and he explored it. And I would very much encourage anyone to go and check out that commencement address, Havel's commencement address to Harvard in 1996. There is so much there that is continues to be inspiring to me. And yeah,
he talks a lot about hope.
Always enormously optimistic man.
Yeah,
and that is something that almost seems ridiculous now. I mean, you asked me at the beginning of when we were talking about how I'm doing right now. I'm feeling the opposite of hope, Brian. I'm feeling enormous stress and tension, and I'm not feeling hope right now when I look at the world. And maybe that's ridiculous. I mean, I think it's probably silly. Havel would probably tell me to hope. But I can't find a lot of hope right now. I'm deeply depressed about the nature of the world and the future of our ability to communicate and find solutions to problems. I have no idea. So, but Havel wasn't. And I also think it's myopic to say that, well, he was talking at a different time. Havel was really brilliant. And I think he probably would have thoughts now that would help us during our time now.
Yeah, I mean, one of his most famous quotes, and I'm paraphrasing, but he says something to the effect that hope is not the assumption that something will turn out well. It's hope is the idea that you do the right thing no matter what happens.
Yeah, that sounds like Havel.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I love that. There's so many things that he understood about, of course, he was coming out of communism. He was coming out of the way that the left, the left clamped down on freedom. He was coming in, his whole argument in The Power of the Powerless is that we have this slogan of workers of the world unite, and people put it in their windows, and they didn't believe what they said. The way the language became ridiculous and devalued, and that's what Largo Desolado was about. About he has to sign this, the whole conflict of that play. I don't know if you know that play. It's a really great play. Tom Stopper.
I have not read it, but yeah,
it's really good. And Tom Stopper did Tom Stopper did most of the translations of his great plays, and he did a great translation of this play. And the whole conflict is that he has to sign this statement talking about himself, and he won't do it. And it's about truth and language, and about language, which is, of course, what we're struggling with. We're struggling with truth and language right now.
Yeah.
What language means and what truth means, and it's something that theater can explore. Theater should explore, and that great theater is exploring. I think that there's some really good theater that's exploring it right now. Yeah.
So where did you go from Emerson?
I went to New York and tried to make it as a as a theater artist. I started a theater company. I went to New York. From Emerson, I had the opportunity to teach at that point and decided not to, which is what I ended up doing. But I didn't. I went to New York. What I had delayed doing after Syracuse, I ended up doing after Emerson. And
and this was like what, 96 or 7 or something?
Yeah,
like
96, right. And I got an equity job within a week of moving to New York. With TheaterWorks USA, but it was equity. And I went on tour. And then the week after I was hired doing that, I was hired at Grandma Sylvia's Funeral, which was an off-Broadway show. And they said that they would keep that for me as a swing and an understudy when I got back from tour. And I did. And I ended up working there and working every week, enough to get health insurance for 3 years, working. And I formed a theater company called Outlet Theater Company, and did a bunch of things. The thing I guess I'm most proud of doing there is a festival called August in January, which was the 150th birthday of August Strindberg, where we collaborated with Manhattan Merrimack College and some people that were really excited about Strindberg at that point, and we premiered these new translations that have become standard now. These translations of The Stronger, which I ended up directing, and Creditors, and Coram Popula. Oh God, I hope I'm saying that right. I'm not sure I am, but that's there were 3 plays that we did. There were 3 new translations that we did, and we premiered them and made it part of this festival, which is very exciting, very exciting. And that was August Wilson's 150th birthday, and I was teaching at that point, and the artistic director of this company, Outlet Theater Company. And then we were, as a lot of small theater companies were doing, we're asking for money. We were 501c3. We were doing all of that, and I was really much more getting excited about directing at that point. I was really clear that that was what I was doing, and that was really where my focus was going. While I was still working at Grandma Sylvia's and still acting, I was still acting in off Broadway and off Broadway shows, and doing things through Outlet. We did an interactive play that called "Do I Hear $5," which was an auction play that we did. We did a bunch of things, which very nearly had a life, but it didn't. And then honestly, 9/11 happened, and the thought of asking for money, at least for me, I mean, some people did, but I didn't feel like I didn't feel the impulse to do that at that point.
Now, where were you when that happened, 9/11?
Where was I?
Yeah.
I was in New York City. Yeah.
But I mean, like, literally, were you in your apartment? Were you at, where were you?
Yeah, I was literally in my apartment. I was literally supposed to go to New Jersey, where I was teaching. I was teaching at that point at a school called Performers Theater Workshop, which still exists. And about to what I was doing at that point was I was working at Grandma Sylvia's funeral, and I was also teaching. And I was in my apartment, and I was supposed to be there at 2 p.m. and turn on the TV and saw what was happening, and at that point called my. I don't think we were married yet, but Andrea, we were married, I believe, maybe a year later, and got on the phone with her and said, screaming at her, "Go home, come home, come home." And so I stayed in my apartment the whole day, and then ended up going on my roof. I was living in Astoria, Queens, if you know where that is. It's right over the river, and we went up on the roof, and I watched everything happen from the roof. The buildings collapse. So look, I mean, it's, and then the smoke, trail off. I'll never forget, of course, anyone who was there. But my view, I saw the smoke just trail off in the distance. And then about a day later, the wind changed direction, and so we got all of that smell. Never forget it. Anyone who was there will never forget it. That smell of burnt metal. Yeah, and that was a crazy time. And about a month later, I accepted a job teaching at a college in Miami called New World School of the Arts, and I ended up teaching there I left New York, really didn't see outlet being something that was, I couldn't really be asking for money, which is really what we were doing. It was about, we had to ask for, I had to raise about 30 grand a year, maybe less, to make anything happen. And it was like, that wasn't going to happen. So I went to Florida, and I taught there for the year, and directed. I taught at the high school. My New World School of the Arts is like, I guess, like LaGuardia for Miami-Dade County. And so I taught at both the college and the high school level there, which is great. What amazing year, amazing year. And realized at that point I wanted to get an MFA. I wanted to teach college or to teach in some way. So decided while I was at New World to apply for schools. And the next year I was at UCLA. Next year I was at UCLA. So I was at Miami for a year, and then the next year was in LA.
Now, I remember when I first met you, and I just thought you were just a very compassionate, thoughtful, present. What I noticed is you were extremely present whenever you were around others, always listening. And you, in one sense, it seemed so different in a way. You seem very grounded, and I always appreciated that. And I remember you had a little, it was like a cocker spaniel.
Yeah, Barnaby, cockapoo,
yeah,
Barnaby. I love Barnaby so much. We had just gotten, he was like our first kid. Yeah, he was really important part of my life there. Yeah,
I wanted one so bad after I met Barnaby. I was like, oh, I have to get one. I was my girlfriend at the time. I was like, oh, let's try to get a cockapoo.
Barnaby was a great dog. He was a great dog. He really was. He was a great dog. Yes, he really was. So yes, I appreciate you saying that in terms of me being grounded. That's
and I just appreciated you listened intently and it's always seemed interested, and as a direct, and I wish I had been directed by you, because I think that would have been a wonderful experience. And so how was your experience at UCLA? What did you think?
Wonderful, challenging. I at that, so I got into a few other schools and really chose to go to UCLA. Honestly, I was very fascinated to go to LA. I had a few other options to go.
Now, did you know that Brian was applying as well?
Yes. Okay. Well, yeah, I asked Brian to write me a recommendation because I knew Brian was very connected to UCLA. So Brian was one of my recommendations. And then maybe a month after I applied, he let me know that he's like, well, I wrote a recommendation, but I'm also applying. So
did you write him a recommendation?
I did not. And I kind of thought, well, I gotta go. I mean, like, Brian and I grew up together. Brian's always inspired me. He really has. I thought that would be a great way for me to get better, to be pushed by Brian. I think Brian's tremendously talented. And he's always been honest with me, and I think respectful of me and my work. And I thought, this is great. This will be good. And so when I looked at the choices I had, I thought, I'll go through this with Brian. I'll do this Brian. So that's what choice. That's why it really was Brian. It was also just go to LA. It was so cool. And they honestly, they gave me a very good deal. I mean, it was free, and then beyond free, it was money. They actually paid for above that. There was actually, but so it was very attractive to go there, and of course the program was very strong. Or I felt it was strong, and I did feel it was strong. I definitely learned an enormous amount there. I'd say the person two people I learned the most from there were Michael Hackett and Michael McLean for very different reasons. I was very close with Michael Hackett. If I was to say the person who was the strongest mentor for me there, it would be Hackett. It really would. And for many reasons. He was very much a champion of me. Maybe champion is too strong a word, but he definitely believed in me, and definitely pushed me. Definitely was available for many conversations. Leon, of course, as well.
Oh, Leon Katz. Yeah.
Oh God, yeah.
He was brilliant. He was really, his stories. I mean,
unbelievable. I mean,
yeah.
like unbelievable. I was lucky enough, a guy named Sergio Costa. I don't know if you know Sergio, recorded all of his lectures. They're all, yeah. His two classes, his entire theater history lecture, and also his avant-garde. They're all recorded, and I've listened to them over and over and over again. And if you don't have them, I'll be happy to share them with you.
Please do. Yeah,
I will. I listen to them, and they're endless. And I actually have, in fact, right here, I got to say, right here, and I promise I didn't plan this. I have Leon's Midnight Plays right here. Leon, it continues to be, when I said to you at the beginning, I have so many mentors, I really do. Leon is certainly one, but back to Michael and Michael McLean was tough. I mean, you'll agree. So hard.
Oh, yeah. My original thesis was a proposal was Ghost Sonata.
And, by the way, your thesis, your Kafka, it blew my mind. It was so great. And I remember talking to Mike. Oh, it was great. It was brilliant. I loved it. I'll never forget. It was so good. It was so good. And I remember talking to him about it. And I remember he loved it. And it was really, really great.
Michael loved it.
Yeah. Well, he loved it. He loved it to me. He loved it to me.
Interesting.
What he said to, I'll give you his my impression of Michael talking about it. Very good. Really very good. Very good. And of course, he
and I gotten into a huge argument over that. I don't remember why, but it required like an intervention and a mediator. And I really don't know what it was about.
Michael did not mince words. Michael never minced words. The fact that he said that, and I promise you he did. And he really liked it, but it was qualified by like, I don't know if I want to admit that I liked it so much, but he did, so that was really what it was. It's like, I don't know if I want to admit it. And he did. And he, and I thought I loved it. I thought it was so interesting, so fascinating. And I love Kafka. I have to really love Kafka. But yeah, Michael was tough, man, tough as nails. Like, but I learned, and I think maybe he's the most important person for me there. In some ways, maybe the most important mentor I've had as a director. He just disciplined me as a director so strongly. The requirements for his making sure that I showed up with my work there was, oh my God. I mean, and it was great. I mean, like, I'm so fortunate that I had someone who had such a high standard, of a tremendously difficult high standard, and having Brian there too, as part of that class. And when I got positive reinforcement, which was interestingly the thing in class that was the most successful thing for me there, was a scene that I did from Long Day's Journey. I directed Anthony Rapp, who you might know from Rent, who was a friend of mine who was part of this poker game. He was actually out there at that point in LA, and I asked him to do it, as well as my friend Mike Messer, who I'm still very close with. Two brilliant actors, like, just brilliant actors. And they were wonderful, and they were so inspired to work together and to delve deep. And if you're going to do O'Neill, you better don't.
Oh yeah, especially that play, Long Day's Journey in the Night.
Yeah.
That's an intense one. Yeah.
Yeah, especially that Act 4 scene, brother of mine, oh brother of mine, which we did, and we just dived, and it was really very, very well received by Michael and by Brian, which meant a lot. But it was from not. I mean, I worked so hard. It created a template. Not that I hadn't wanted to work hard before, but I don't think I worked as hard up to that point on anything in my life as I worked on that scene. I don't think I did. And I don't think I worked as hard on anything as my thesis, as Machina, up to that point. As carefully, as not letting anything go, any microsecond of any choice go, which I really am very grateful for. So I don't know if that was your experience, but it was certainly mine.
Well, my experience was painful because it actually Metamorphosis was not my thesis. It was my second year production, and my third year was The Balcony by Jean Genet,
which I don't think I saw.
It's all right. It did not go well.
Oh, and, well, okay, but I don't think I saw it. I know I definitely didn't see it. I would have remembered if I saw it. It's so weird that I didn't see it though. I don't know why I didn't.
I may have even said, "Don't go see it." I mean,
I don't think that would have been a reason. There must have been a reason why I go. But okay. Well,
yeah, I mean, it was 2004, so I don't know what was going on in 2004. But that was the year I graduated, and
right.
I just it was a major transformative year only because I went through a shift in my vision loss, and then that was my girlfriend broke up with me, and then that was a disaster. I was not able to get where I wanted to go with it, and I made some mistakes, and
probably internalized those mistakes harder than you needed to, Brian.
Yeah. Well, I talked to Jose Luis about it.
Oh, and I was just going to mention him in terms of mentors of a human being at UCLA. Gary Gardner and Jose, as well as Hackett to a degree. But Jose, I love to this day as a human who I really wish I could have worked with more, because the amount of respect I have for that man as an artist and also as a human being. I'm glad that Jose was there for you. Hopefully he was there for you to maybe help you process some of that.
Well, actually, it was only recently we had a conversation on the podcast that where we discussed it, and it made me go, I have a lot of regret of how I handled it, and I mean, but that was a long time ago, but I appreciated his comments about it and how it was just part of the process, and I was very strict on myself, and and I was not thinking about it as part of my creative process, and it was just one step. I was thinking that I had to be amazing because it was my thesis, and then I had to find work through that, but anyway, that's the way it was. But
I mean, I felt that about Machinel too. I was very proud of it. I was really proud of it, but I was like, where's this going to lead? And honestly, my personal life at that point, it was really clear that I was going to be going back to New York. Andrea, who I was married to at that point, we're not married anymore, it was very clear that we're going to go back to New York. And
did she act? Was she in theater?
When she was a kid.
Yeah.
But we met when she was in the musical theater writing program at BMI, the Lemon Angle Musical Theater Writing Program. So she had stopped acting at that point. But we were definitely going to move back to New York. And I definitely, as we all do, in terms of regrets, should I have stayed in LA? Should I have built on that? Maybe. I don't know. But I came back to New York and I started teaching. It's weird to say we got pregnant. Isn't that it's a weird statement? We got pregnant, but she got pregnant. She got pregnant.
And you helped.
I did. I had a part. our son Asher was born. Pretty much 9 months after we moved back. So it's 16 years. He's going to be 16 in January, and so really right away we started a family in New York City, and it became very clear that I needed to earn a living. And what I did was I reached back to Emerson, and I reached back and I was like, I wonder if my certification is still valid. It turns out it was, and that New York had reciprocity, so I could start teaching theater in New York City, which I did, and I've never stopped. Although it was in New York City, I started teaching in New York City, and then I taught in Ossining, which is upstate New York. Not upstate New York. It's like Westchester County. It's where Sing Sing is. It's but wonderful district. And then I had a wonderful year there. And then after a year there, I ended up taking a job in Great Neck. You probably don't know these towns, but Great Neck is a West Egg from Great Gatsby. If you happen to know the Great Gatsby, very wealthy community, wonderful community, wonderful school district. And I taught there for 10 years and really had a wonderful amount of wonderful experiences teaching there with some great kids, and then decided to leave because a teacher in Chappaqua, which is where the Clintons live, was convicted of child molestation.
Ah,
yeah,
horrible.
Yeah, and so because jobs don't open up, theater education jobs don't open up, and people don't really leave those jobs. And I can imagine. It was very weird, I think, to a lot of people that I left that job. It was kind of a weird thing for me, but that job looked really kind of interesting, and it attracted me. So I ended up teaching in Chappaqua for 4 years, and then I was dismissed, as they say, along with everybody who hired me. And so I lost that job, which was the best thing that could have happened. And then I about a month later got a job teaching in the Bronx, where I've been teaching very, very different kids than I've ever taught, which are, I had taught very, both not in Ossining. Ossining actually was more similar to the Ossining had a much more mixed population based on every demographic you can say, socioeconomic as well as diverse in terms of African American, Latino. But Great Neck and Chappaqua were not. They were wealthy white kids. And where I teach now are not. I mean, they're very, very disadvantaged kids, I would say. Definitely disadvantaged kids. It's weird to use that term. I don't think about it that way, but I guess thinking about it related to Chappaqua and to Great Neck, they're disadvantaged. And it's been the most important part of my development as a theater artist, teaching in the Bronx. We started this conversation talking about what I learned during COVID. It's really what I learned about compliance in terms of these kids. The work. I mean, that's the work I did today. It was the work reaching these students and struggling to figure out the best way that I can negotiate a lot of things that are going on in our culture right now. I mean, not apologizing about being white, but acknowledging that, and a lot of things, and
about privilege and
privilege, and the fact that the kids go through metal detectors and they're patted down, and that a lot of my kids, live in shelters, or they live in, more difficult situations, certainly than the kids that I taught previously, and what they're bringing in terms of, again, I'll go back to the word compliance, what they're bringing in terms of the idea of compliance. The kids in the burbs that I taught were compliant. The kids for me to say get in a circle where I teach now, it's ridiculous. I can't say get in a circle and expect kids to stand up and get in a circle. That's not going to happen. I got to build to that. There's got to be enormous amount of scaffolding and buy-in before kids will stand. And
trust.
Trust. Yeah. And even But if that can happen, which I'm continuing to work to try to create, the amount of buy-in potential is, I wouldn't say more than the suburbs, because there are kids in the suburbs who can certainly buy in, of course. But what I do say is that in the suburban experience, and also at French Woods, kids will get up, they'll stand in a circle, they'll do their thing, and then they'll want an A.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they won't do much necessarily, except for the kids who really do much, and then they'll want an A. Whereas the kids who I teach now, they won't do anything, but when they buy in, they really do give their heart to it. So.
What is, if you can think of an instance or a time, I'm sure there's been many where it's been a transformative experience for them in their life, that they connected to a character or a play in a way that transformed their lives and how they thought. Can you think of anything?
I don't know. I hope that's the case. My first year teaching, I was involved in the August Wilson monologue competition. And there was a student that, which as actually doesn't, the August Wilson estate has actually pulled their involvement from that monologue competition. I think because Netflix is now doing all of the shows. So there's this organization in New York called LEAP that was involved, that I was partnering with, that was involved in this monologue competition that I was having my students work with. And I had a few students that were involved in that got to not only city finals but state finals. And the amount of I mean, to answer your question, yeah, enormously transformative. I hope, Brian, that the kids that I'm working with right now, I'm working right now with kids that I think are being transformed by the work that I'm doing with them. I can think of 10 who are really buying in, who are really excited about the work that we're doing, about the plays that they're writing. I have kids writing their own plays, and I have kids that are writing plays now that are some of the greatest student plays that I've ever, just amazing. I have this one girl who is writing a play that's about three separate families that are going through COVID, and she wrote it. She'd never written a play before, but what I started in terms of teaching was teaching stage directions, teaching the language of theater, just the grit of theater and how to write for theater and what it means for proscenium theater. And the ability, she wrote three different families that are on stage simultaneously, and she's going back and forth with these. It's just tremendous. I mean, really tremendous. Just finding the voices, just allowing herself to listen to voices speak to her. I find that actually happens a lot. Doing an exercise right now with kids based upon the story All Summer in a Day. You know that story by Ray Bradbury?
I do not. What
you might remember it. It's the kids who are on Venus. Great short story by Ray Bradbury where these kids are the children of parents who are on Venus to colonize Venus, and the sun in this story comes out once every 7 years, and so they live in this underground tunnel because it rains. I mean, it's obviously not real, which is interesting to explore with the kids, but that once every 7 years the sun comes out, and this one girl remembers, because she came 4 years ago. She remembers the sun, and the other kids absolutely hate and resent her because she remembers the sun. And this is the story is the day that the sun actually comes out, and they lock her in a closet because they hate her so much. And they go out and they experience it. And at the end of the story, they remember that they've locked her in the closet and they let her out. And it's a great story. The kids love it for a lot of reasons. It's a great story because it's really about quarantine. It's about COVID. It's about being locked in. There's a lot of resonance for now. And also it's about bullying, and it leads to a lot. So the kids are writing short plays, they're writing monologues, they're writing things about it, and they're doing amazing things. They really are. So I don't know. I mean, to answer that question, I hope, Brian, that they're doing better. I can tell you that I've definitely gotten better at my job in the Bronx over the last 3 years. And it's what we started with. COVID really helped enormously, because when I started, the idea of compliance, the idea of the kids not getting in a circle was really upsetting to me. Like,
Mhm.
because that's what I was used to. How could I start teaching drama? Or if they didn't put their camera on, how can you teach drama without that? How can you
Mm.
do that? Truth is, you can. You
Mm.
totally can. And the fact
Mm.
that they're showing up, the fact that they're there, is enough. Is enough. And rather than saying, well, what are you not doing? I mean, this sounds so trite, but what are you doing? And what can I do? And so, my thinking related to that has shifted very much. And I hope that I would hope that it would be a shift that would reflect the way that I would direct adults too, in terms of being just more forgiving, more present, more more celebratory of what people are doing, rather than looking at what you're not. Like, say,
Mhm.
because I think it's so easy to do that. It's so easy to, and the kids that I teach now are so used to being told about what they're not doing. They're so used to being told about how they're lesser than. They really are, and it's a
Mm.
default position that they'll go to, and they'll use in sometimes bad ways, and sometimes, well, I'm not going to succeed, so therefore I'll act out. And I played into that when I started teaching it in the Bronx, right before COVID, and I don't anymore. I really don't. I I don't.
Yeah, it reminds me, I think Goethe has a quote about, treating people as you see them, and I'm not exactly sure what it is. I'm fucking it up, but it was the idea is that they'll become what you believe them to be, if
Yeah,
if you believe that they
yeah.
can. Yeah.
It really is true. It's harder to do, especially if you have a set of expectations, which I certainly had, related to what it meant to teach theater.
Hmm.
You know, which I brought with me from the years that I taught. And I'm not discounting what I did in those years, because I think that I I think that was all valuable too. But yeah, when students present with resistance in a way, or at least for me, when students presented with resistance in ways that I wasn't used to, my immediate reaction was, well, it was very ego based. It
Hmm.
was like, oh, well, you're challenging me. And as much as I knew that that was wrong,
Hmm.
that happened. That happened. And
Hmm.
of course, you lose immediately when that
Yeah.
happens. Immediately, you lose. You know, so I don't do that anymore, and I do what I think you're saying. The Goethe's quote.
Yeah, it's encouraging them, um, so that they see themselves that way, that they can achieve the things they want, that
Yeah, but
they have
right,
value. And
but also not assuming. I mean, like, I was coming from such a really a rigid, egotistical, defensive place,
mhm.
and I can say that if you come from that spot, and the kids I teach now are very attuned to looking for that. They're
Mhm.
looking. They're looking. I think maybe all kids are, but these kids that I'm teaching, very much, they're looking for you to think that they're not capable. And as soon as you do that, they'll say, "Yep, yeah, see, they're," and then they'll shut down. And and of course they are enormously capable, which I think is a lot for me of what the protests, the Black Lives Matter protests, were about.
Mhm.
The assumptions that as a white person, that white people make about communities of color,
Mhm.
that I was making. And it's very uh, you know very controversial right now to say, oh, well, CRT and woke. I believe it deeply that an enormous amount of for me personally, enormous amount of self-reflection without apology, because the kids certainly don't want me to apologize. They don't want me to apologize, but of really checking the way that, and continuing to check the way that maybe I definitely assume certain behaviors that I ascribe to being resistant, or I don't know, difficult, are not real. They're not, they're, I don't know. I'm not saying this as articulately as I'd like, actually, but I definitely learned a lot, and I continue to learn a lot about the way that, as a person who is not of color, how I can, without apologizing, realize the way that I have made assumptions that I maybe wouldn't have wanted to admit, that when I've re-examined them, have created more space for students to be able to exist. I think space is the answer, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know.
No, yeah, I understand. It's allowing people to be who they are, and you know, I think a lot about the Zapatistas of creating a world where many worlds are embraced. You know, and I think that is the goal of theater is to
Yeah.
showcase that.
Yeah, that's the goal of theater. Yeah.
Um, let me ask you this: speaking of hope, how do you feel their writing is? Do you feel it's hopeful, or do you feel it's? How do you feel? Where is it coming from? What are you seeing a lot of?
Oh God, that's a great question, Brian. I don't know. I think it's honest. When at its best, it's listening. The best writing that these kids are doing, and I would say probably it's true. Yeah, I didn't really get that from the suburban kids I had in terms of writing.
Mm-hmm.
It's listening and allowing themselves to listen to the voices that are part of their lives.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's hopeful or not, I don't know if I could say. It's not, it's honest when
Mm-hmm.
it's best. I think, I don't know. I think it's hopeful because it's art. I think art is hopeful. The fact
Mm-hmm.
that they're, yeah, I think it is hopeful by the fact that they're doing it. The act
Mm-hmm.
of art is hopeful,
Right.
but they're not trying to be hopeful or not hopeful. You know, the best writing amongst my kids now, to answer your question, isn't reaching for hope, and if anything, it's angry. If there's a mood, it's angry.
Yeah, there's a lot to be angry about.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there is.
Yeah.
But it's not only angry. I mean, I don't want to paint a broad stroke that say every kid is writing angry things. There's a lot of anger, a lot of anger, a lot of great anger, a lot of great anger. An exercise that I did with the kids. You know the piano lesson by August Wilson?
Mm-hmm.
So you know the play well. You know what?
Not
You know,
really. I mean, I reviewed it a long time ago, but yeah.
yeah. So the exercise that I did with the kids was I just, it was like their project was, I had them either act, design, or direct based upon something that happened in the play 3 years ago, which was the death of Crawley, Bernice's husband Crawley. If you
Mm-hmm.
remember, the conflict at the end of Act One is that Bernice is, in addition to the piano. If you remember the play, it's about how Boy Willie wants to sell the piano in order to pay this amount of money so that he can own the land that their family were slaves on.
Mm-hmm.
When he and Bernice, and this piano, and I don't want to go into too much. This piano was carved by their ancestor. It's, oh God, I love this place. It's so beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And Bernice refuses to sell it because the piano has too much value, and so it's there. So, but part of this conflict and part of the end of Act One is that Bernice says to Boy Willie that my husband would still be alive if it wasn't you. That my husband died because he went out with you one night, and he died because you were moving wood. They moved a little bit of wood on their own, and they got into a fight with the sheriff, and the sheriff killed Crawley. And the two other characters that were still in the play, one of them got wounded, but the other one, Boy Willie, her brother, wasn't wounded at all. And so what I had them do is write Crawley's death,
Mm-hmm.
write the actual scene. So it doesn't happen in the play, it happens off scene. Write Crawley's death, and or design Crawley's death, or act one of the monologues in that scene. To answer your question, the writing, and a lot of kids chose to write. The writing in those scenes, it was the best, and there was a lot of really good writing, was really because the people that killed Crawley were white, very clearly white. You know, the sheriff was white, and it brought up, I think, well, I hope, this ability for the kids to write this incredible injustice in the 1930s, which some of the kids were very anachronistic about, and they were like, well, he pulls out a phone, you know, so, you know, various things. They were like, well, that really wouldn't be there in the 30s, but in any event, there was so much honest anger about the incredible lack of power that the characters experience. That it really came through. I mean, I'll share it with you, Brian. There were some incredible examples. So it's a great question. Was the writing hopeful? God, it was honest. It was filtered through in the best way. And most of the kids really that chose to write really thought about it. And they really thought about it. Filtered through their experience of the Black Lives Matter protests, or their experience of the Black Lives Matter protests. And you know, the August Wilson play clearly, obviously crystallized that. I mean, I didn't have to do much, you know, you know, the play just is so good. And just every single kid I taught loved that play. Every single kid I taught loved that play, which isn't surprising. I mean, it's, you know, it's an amazing piece of theater. Was their writing hopeful? It was angry. So
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of injustice, you know, happening, and you know, it makes sense that they would be angry. You know, I'm angry, and I'm sure you are as well.
Yeah, I am deeply angry.
So one of the things I wanted to ask you about, because I feel like there's a lot of diversity in your theatrical experiences. So you start out with musical theater. You mentioned Arthur Miller. You mentioned Eugene O'Neill, August Strindberg, Vaclav Havel, and August Wilson. I mean, there's a lot of diversity in style. So like, you know, when I started out with musical theater, and then I went more and more experimental as I went on. And I kind of stayed in that experimental space. But you seem to go, is there a through line, or is it,
God, I don't know. I mean, honestly, I don't know, man. I mean, like, really what I'm doing is teaching now. Like I would love to be able to direct adults now, but really my time is spent figuring out how I can best serve students right now. I still think I deeply love Beckett. If I could choose a North Star, I think it would still be Beckett for me.
What would you direct right now?
If I could direct anything?
Yeah, if like somebody said, I'll give you the Mark Taper Forum or whatever, and to do whatever you want, what would you do?
God, I wish I had a better answer, except for the short plays of Beckett. Maybe it would be that. I think maybe it would be that. I think right now, just, I don't know if it'd be the Mark Taper. That's a big space for Beckett. It would not be Beckett at the Mark Taper.
I think of a space that makes sense to you, but my point is that if somebody said, you know, here's an unlimited budget, you can do whatever you want, what would you do?
Right now?
Yeah,
for sure, it would be Sunday in the Park with George. For sure.
How come?
Well, I love it. It's my favorite Sondheim. I always love Sondheim. I directed Sunday once at French Woods years ago. It's still something I really love in terms of production. But yeah, I mean, like everybody, I've been thinking about Sondheim a lot lately, for, you know, obvious reasons. And I would love to direct Sunday. Sunday says so much to me about what art means and what art's about. I would love to do something interesting with it. I would love to try to do something cool with it,
Mhm.
in terms of projections and various things. And I just love the piece. Right now, if someone said, go work in the market table, I would say someday. I don't know. I'm going to be thinking about that question for about 2 weeks, Brian. I should have thought that you would ask me a question like that. It's not, I did not prepare an answer.
That's all
But I
right.
think, yeah,
You
I
got you
think
got a lot going on right now that's very stressful. And
well, we all do. Yeah, but sure.
but
But
I
yeah,
mean,
yeah, yeah.
immediately you're dealing with something very, very stressful. And but where do you see yourself going like from here?
Well, I just want to make it work at Lehman High School really, really
Mhm.
well. I really
Mhm.
do. And honestly, I don't know. I don't know where it goes from there. It's so weird because right now, there are people that I'm in touch with. There are artists I'm in touch with that I'm talking about working with. If there's time, I'd love to pull together. Some really, really wonderful artists. Josh is one of them that I mentioned
Mhm.
that I'd love to collaborate with and to do something with. But yeah, I don't have a lot of time. I
Yeah.
mean, I really don't. Uh, and that's an excuse because people can certainly make time.
Mhm.
But what I'd like to do is make this work really well, really, really make this work well. And I don't know, see where it goes, see where teaching kids, right now, my creative energies are really spent on trying to figure out the best way that I can bring out the best in the kids that are in front of me. That is really what I'm doing. And as weird as it sounds, it's enough right now,
Mhm.
creatively for me. Right now, it's enough. Maybe it's enough because it's COVID. Maybe it's enough because there aren't a lot of other opportunities. But yeah, I'm in talks with people to try to do some things. I'm writing. One of the things that I did was I wrote a lot of poetry last year, a lot of poetry.
Mhm.
I don't know what I want to do with that poetry, but I like a lot of it.
Mhm.
I'd love to be able to start maybe turning it into something in terms of a play, but I don't know if I will. Right now, my creative energies are about teaching, and I'm
Mhm.
cool with that right now. Like it really is. It's enough because it's definitely challenging. It's definitely challenging. Um, yeah,
Yeah, and I think about teaching myself, about how important it is because to be able to, like you said, create that space for a student to see themselves and what they can become, and and the possibilities, and which is for me very hopeful. And I think it's a beautiful thing to be able to do that and to encourage somebody in a loving way.
yeah. It definitely is, Brian. I would recommend you do it. I think you'd be a wonderful teacher if you can.
No, I meant specifically what you're doing.
Oh,
I have to be honest, I always felt unworthy of being a an educator. Just I was like, well, I always felt like I didn't know enough. I didn't have enough experience. So, but you know, um, but I think about it now and I go, oh, maybe I could have done that, and maybe, but I've had a lot of challenges over the years, mostly myself being
of
the
course.
massive challenge,
Yeah.
my own mind. But yeah, I mean, I think it's wonderful that you've been doing it and for doing it for so long. And I know that there's lives that you probably transformed that you're unaware of, and you'll find out later because they'll come back. Because one of the things that I've done in this podcast is go back to people that and say thank you. Like Craig Belknap, I did a podcast with him, and I thanked him for what he did for me. Um,
No,
and I'm
certainly.
sure,
Which, yeah, go ahead.
no, I'm just saying, I'm sure that over the years they'll come back.
Well, they have,
Yeah.
and that's wonderful. And certainly, what you're doing is you're educating through this podcast.
Yeah.
What you're doing is absolutely that. Certainly teaching, and I deeply appreciate you giving me the opportunity to reflect. uh, And that's really what teaching is. I think it's challenging people to think about the important things in their lives.
Yeah.
Certainly what you're doing, asking, important questions that they get to me. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah, thank you. And let me ask you, I'm going to ask you a couple questions before we close
Sure.
out.
Yeah.
The first question is, I've been asking this of everybody recently, is if you had like an omnipotent voice and you could speak to everyone on earth in their own language, or even if they're any type of living being, what would you say to them?
Be kind. Be kind. Be kind. Be kind. 2 words. Be kind. Be
Yeah.
kind. Everybody is struggling. Be kind. Be kind. That's it. I don't want to add to it. Be kind. Be kind.
All right. Thank you. What would be your epitaph?
Oh God.
That's it.
I love it. Oh God. Yeah, maybe.
In that inflection.
Oh God. I love that. Maybe I'll make that. I hope I did well. Maybe that would. I hope I did well.
Well, let me say this. I think about, when I think about you, like I was saying, I really have fond memories of our moments on the benches with Barnaby.
Oh
And
yeah.
and I always felt you listened in a very loving way, in a very caring, loving, compassionate way. And I always appreciated it. And I want you to know that, because um, I appreciate it. You had a very calming, warm, uh, present spirit, and thank you for that.
Thank you, Brian. That means so much. It really does. I appreciate you saying that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Uh,
Oh, go ahead. What were you going to say?
I'm gonna say the same of you. I mean, the moment I met you, I was immensely impressed with your brilliance, with your thoughtfulness, with your ability to listen. And of course, I followed you over the years, and I know we haven't talked about your struggle. I mean, I ended up talking so much, but after this, I'd love to be in touch more, and to also, we don't have time right now, but I'd love to hear about your blindness, Brian, about what that is for you. And we didn't really get it. I mean, I'm very much interested in talking to you. So I hope we can rekindle a friendship from this. I would love that. I really, really would. And there are definitely things off the record that I'd love to talk to you about you, about, not that I'm saying that I held things back in this conversation. I didn't. But I'd love to talk more, because it was about me. But honestly, I'm really interested in talking to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's stay connected, and we'll continue the conversation. And is there anything that you would like to share? Anything you would want us to? Is it your school, or is there anything like donating, or, because I know schools are in need right
No,
now?
I mean, not really. Just I hope people, anyone who listens, understand that teachers, New York City school teachers, we are really doing our best. I hope, and I imagine people who'd be listening to your podcast would understand that and would be teacher friendly. But if there's anyone that isn't, please understand that teachers are getting up and they're doing their best every day. And I imagine most people would believe that. So just know that us public school teachers are doing our part, trying to do our part, I guess.
Well, thank you, Jonathan Gellert, everybody. Thank you so much for being here and sharing what is alive within you. I appreciate it. And thank you, everybody, for listening on Apple Podcast and watching on YouTube. This is The Blind Man in Black. I'm Brian Snyder. And if you like this, please rate, subscribe, and review. And thank you, Jonathan Gellert, for being here. Deeply appreciate it.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. Now we're going to have our awkward ending. Here we go.